Terry McMahon is here with us in the house, award-winning scriptwriter, actor, man of many talents, gave an amazing speech at the Tommy Robinson rally, if you've seen it, an amazing speech, a rip-roaring speech. It did us all proud, more than proud, and Terry's here going to talk again with the one and only John Waters. Now, John, I'm going to pass it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Derek. Good evening again. Hi, Terry. How you doing? Test your mic.
Hey, John.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Terry and I haven't met before. We've spoken on the phone a few times. Very long conversations. I've been aware of Terry for a very long time. Not a very long time, quite a few years. And I agree with what Derek says. I think he's probably, I think without a question, he's the best public speaker in Ireland at the moment. There's no question about it in my mind. But I don't mean just in terms of rhetoric, I mean in terms of content, in terms of intelligence and in passion and all of those things that go to the art of speech in that sense. But the more important thing for me about Terry is that he actually stood up when very few people were standing up, and particularly in the, what would I call it, the sector, a terrible word, but you know what I mean, that he belongs to, that of the artistic community. You know, that he was out and about speaking about these things when it mattered. And so I wanted to ask you about that, Terry. You know, you know, what is it about you that you got into this area and then you somehow stood apart from it at that critical moment? Why are you so odd?
Have you met my father? I have to confess to being very nervous being here. Because, again, John would understand this more than most, but when you're accustomed to being in opposition, you kind of put on armor. But when you're in the company of astonishing human beings who are not just your equal, but very often people you aspire to, it becomes a kind of unveiling. So before I even answer John's question, it's an honor to sit in the room with you people. You are some of the bravest, most compassionate in the truest sense of the term, human beings in the country. In terms of John's question about the so-called sector, as he rightly hesitates in calling it, I think the job, the responsibility, the reason for existence for artists was always about the gray area, always about questioning the function and form of those in power. And to see, like, firstly, I hate being here. I hate that our lives have gone on this course. I would be an avowed liberal, lefty lunatic. And then to see the people that I adored, revered, and aspired to be become such collective cowards was devastating, like personally devastating. But then you have to ask yourself, do you want to be a coward? And I know that everybody in this room has asked themselves that same question. And I'd prefer not to be a coward. And yet every day you're told that you're a piece of shit. Every day you're told you're a fascist, a Nazi, a subhuman form of life, for asking the very questions that artists are supposed to ask, for entering the gray area, not because you're arrogantly, confidently insisting that you're right, but because you don't know what's right, and you need to find out. And to see the people that we revered be so arrogant in their cowardice, and then to discover people we may not have revered. Like John We were discussing it earlier, but John wrote an extraordinary book about U2 and the context, the cultural context, and I read it many years ago. And I remember reading John's writing and going, Jesus Christ, this is what writing is about. Like John, you listen to his introduction to the last conversation, how he can extemporize with such poetic precision, no ego, just a desire to discover the undiscoverable. That's what artists used to be. And I think that the consequence of all of this is that the kind of people in this room are the kind of people that will give birth to what art used to be, which is having the courage to know very little about the outcome, but determinedly discovering the liars, the frauds, the degenerates in the conversation.
Yeah. Terry, you said that thing you said about the words fascist and the fact that you're a lefty liberal. I was as well. I mean, I when I was a teenager, when I was a young man, I would have regarded myself as a left-winger. But kind of life got me by the scruff of the neck and shook me, and I changed then. But I didn't change, as it were, in a kind of a vexatious way. I simply kind of said, no, this doesn't make sense. But what you said there about the words is so telling, because they know how hurtful those words are to people like you and to people like me. Like, to be called a fascist when you know what a fascist is, and that these people, very often who are calling you fascists, they're much closer to fascism than you'll ever be, even in your dreams. Like, the whole thing is so clinically and carefully and cleverly stitched together, isn't it? To actually divide people, divide you from your, if you wanted dissent, which you did, very, very courageously. But that makes you much more of a pariah than even another kind of pariah, which is just, somebody who's always been maybe protesting or whatever. You suddenly are awakened from your conscience is awakened in the context of your vocation as an artist. And you then must, as it were, volunteer almost to become this fascist in the eyes of other people. Isn't that right?
Well, again, it's interesting that the idea of fascism, like anybody who knows anything about language and the reality and the history of language and the etymology of that word understands that fascism is an instrument of the state combined with the corporate to remove dissent. So the idea of calling some powerless gimp filmmaker a fascist is absurd, ridiculous in any other context. It's comic book. But you're talking about words and the power of words. I think that we changed. Again, we can only discuss our own country, our own culture, but I think that during repeal, it was the first time that I saw words being so subverted that they ended up being used as a weaponized fashion of their opposite meaning. Now again, your own particular personal position on abortion is yours. I, for example, think that abortion should be legal, and couples or individuals or women who have abortions, that's their decision. But at the same time, don't lie to me and tell me you're a fucking hero. Don't lie to me and tell me that you're compassionate. Don't lie to me and tell me that the unborn child is somehow an irrelevance. And when we take words like compassion, and we take words like courage, and words like feminism, and necessarily brilliant, beautiful, complex, magnificent words, and turn them into weapons, we have a major problem. So even in the last conversation, I remember reading, people who died of COVID, the word of, and then the word of was replaced with the word with. Now, dying of COVID and dying with COVID are not just two diametrically different things, but one is an entire fallacy, where posthumously someone takes a test that's questionable in the extreme anyway, and diagnoses you with having died of COVID. But then later, it transpired they meant with COVID. Now, when you say something, when you turn the word of into the word with, and you reveal the degeneracy behind the use of language, you end up with a culture, particularly a culture like Ireland. Is there a more esteemed culture in the world in relation to language than Ireland? We spoke Irish. The English come over here, not the English, the British Empire, which is different. Most working class English people, anybody who's lived in England or spent time in England knows that they're wonderful people. But the British Empire, the people in power, the people in control, when they took our language from us and imposed their language upon us, what did we do? We subverted their language to such a degree that we gave them back Oscar Wilde, Samuel Beckett. We told them how to fucking use English. What a work of art. And now, what we're doing now is we're destroying meaning and language. When we use the word compassion to justify the removal of the right of the most vulnerable life form there is, we have destroyed the meaning of language. And for me, language is everything, because you can have a conversation with somebody who doesn't speak your language. And because of your soul, because of your visceral engagement, both of you can understand each other on a profound level, where the truth of your interaction transcends the limitations of language. But when you subvert that, and the lie of your language creates a communal agreement that we are now all part of the lie, you have to have the decency and the respect for your culture to say, this is a fucking lie. And when you say that, liars want to hurt you. And in this room, the fact that you are the far right, Jesus Christ.
This question about politics and art, politics and creativity and culture, it's a very vexed question, which kind of, because there's truth on both sides of the argument, in the sense that, you know, the artist is not a politician. He's not duty bound to make speeches, nor is he necessarily bound to put politics into his work. And yet there's another function, which is the artist as the conscience of his people, of his race, of the time, which is something that can be accommodated in art, obviously, but also outside of it, in the context of the stature of the artist being used in a particular thing when there is a moral issue which is so pressing that his presence or her presence and his voice is so vital that its absence would mean something not good in the time. And that's what we suffered from so much in the last 2 years, that artists hid behind this idea. And I know from somebody who's tried to write plays, for example, from time to time, it is not easy to write good plays that are political. It's not easy to write good songs that are political. 1984 is a very rare book, in that it is both a brilliant novel and an extraordinary political statement of its time and of our time, never mind Orwell's time. So I'm wondering, what is the answer to artists who say, oh, no, it's not my job to speak about COVID or whatever, what's been happening to our country. I just make art. Art's for art's sake. That's my thing. How do you feel about that? How do you speak to artists who say that and shrug and walk away?
I don't think it's the job or the responsibility of the artist to be a politician. I don't think it's the responsibility of the artist to take a polemic or a political position that is propaganda. I think your responsibility as an artist is to enter those uncomfortable spaces. And if you're not uncomfortable in that space, maybe you're just masturbating. Maybe it's just pointless nonsense. My problem is not with artists who choose not to make a political position clear to an audience. Again, I don't think that's your function or your job. My problem is with artists who acquiesce entirely to a government system of censorship, of dehumanization, and of subsequent criminalization of people who question a situation like the COVID situation. And I think that acquiescence is more troubling because we look to artists, not to have answers. If you're an artist going around giving answers, shut the fuck up. But if you're an artist who's going around asking questions, then you're doing your job. Now, the difference between art and propaganda, the function of art is to create a cathartic response in the audience. So you stimulate and provoke the audience into confronting their presumed moral position. And whatever their presumed moral position is, they personally address it after they have experienced the art. Your job as a propagandist is to shut people up and get them to acquiesce to what you are saying. The moment you become a propagandist, you lose the right to call yourself an artist, and you destroy the connection between the audience and the art.
What role do you think does public funding play in the relative silence now and the relative cowardice of most artists? And I don't mean that in an accusatory way necessarily, because I don't mean that it's wrong to fund artists. It isn't. The state should fund artists. The people should fund artists. That was always part of it. Maybe we could ask questions about the mechanism. But the principle isn't wrong. And yet something seems to have gone wrong, doesn't it? But in the same way, I'll just as an analogy mention RTE, for example, which is, the national broadcaster. And people say, well, it's because the state is now subventing it to the level that it is now completely corrupt and a voice of propaganda. And I'd say, well, no. RTE was always a semi-state broadcaster, a state broadcaster. But very rarely did that become a problem, because you had people in there at a high level of high principle and understanding and intelligence and passion for what they were doing. And they stood, just as in journalism, like people like Douglas Gageby. Like you had Kevin O'Kelly in RTE who went to jail for a principle of his right to do his job despite what the government was saying. And he said, no, the state broadcaster has nothing to do with me. I work as a journalist in here, and if you want to fire me, that's fine, but don't stop me doing my job. So there's something what's going on is not simply a simple question of, well, they're being paid public money, therefore they're bound to be corrupt. That's not necessarily true. Something else is going on here. And I just wonder what you think about that. How is that to be? Because it is a problem, for sure. Because now more and more artists feel, writers, and they are dependent, naturally, on different bursaries or whatever it is, to keep going between books or between exhibitions or whatever it is. And, they have been told in no uncertain terms, by whatever osmotic means, be careful.
Well, I think it's more than osmosis. It's very specific and very clear. Again, like if you look at RTE, and again, both John and I have worked in RTE, there's a whole bunch of really lovely people who work there, like really lovely human beings. But there's a whole bunch of lovely human beings who worked in prisons and camps and all kinds of dehumanizing processes that they justified by saying I was just doing my job. One of them has just been elected president who turfed people out of their homes on behalf of vulture funds and banks. So when we talk about the idea of culture and the value and the necessity of art, I don't have a problem with anybody being funded by any organization. For me, the major problem is that, again, I'll use repeal as an example, only because it's the example, but how many documentaries were made, short films and feature films, about Repeal the Eighth? I was asked to direct 2 of them. I was asked to make speeches on behalf of Repeal the Eighth. And my immediate response was, okay, my empathy lies with you, but what makes you presume that I'm for this? And the moment I asked that question, the people who were wrapping their arms around you in celebration of your history were suddenly going, this guy is the enemy. So when you look at the bodies that fund any kind of narrative question, tell me one documentary that was made about the horror of abortion regret. Tell me one short film that was made about the pain of having to find yourself in a position where financial realities means that you have to rob yourself of parenthood. These films are not only not made, not commissioned, they're looked on as something disgusting. Now, the same principle applies to our government. What documentary, what film, what feature film has been made about the corruption within our government? What documentary, what film, what feature has been made about COVID? What documentary, what feature has been made about any of the most landmark important elements in our modern culture? None. So it's not just that the finances are selectively applied, it's that they have a stranglehold on every narrative that we're capable of engaging with. And when you do that to children, when you have a narrative that a child who decides that they are born in the wrong body because somehow that idea entered their head, and that child is then described as a hero by ideologically corrupted teachers who are protected by education systems that are pumping our children full of the most nefarious ideas imaginable. And yet if you question it, not only are you far right, not only are you a scumbag, but you can be sure as shit you won't be funded.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this word, this term, far right, and right. That.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for interrupting. That lady who asked that question, please do ask that question in a minute, because part of what we, Seth and John, want to do is we want to have a conversation with you. So please, thank you.
Another few minutes, and then we're going to the floor. So
shut the fuck up until then.
Yeah. This is. I'd love to hear what do you feel, Terry, when somebody calls you right wing or far right? What does it do to your psyche?
It's strange because, again, we're back to language, the meaning of language. What did far right mean? Like, far right was something to be ashamed of in terms of the history of humankind. To be far right meant that you robbed people of their humanity, you subjugated them, and you destroyed them. And now these terms are being used to describe somebody who dissents. And I'm talking about, for me, a very qualitative dissent, where you go, is it wrong of me to question why my children are being taught that somehow invasive surgery that can augment their body for the rest of their lives, where an open wound is called a vagina, by adults who are fucking insane, makes me far right? Then I'd be far right.
But it's an extraordinarily powerful instrument that they have discovered, the concept of spell words. That they can create a kind of an enchantment or disenchantment around somebody by virtue of one word, one label. And the whole idea, see, because we grew up, I mean, you're a good few years younger than I am, but we kind of grew up in the sort of slipstream or the after effect of the 1960s, the 60s revolution, in which there was a sense of freedom in a particular context, a sense of individual freedom, sexual freedom, all those things. And also that somehow or other goodness was politically coterminous with leftism in a certain sense. Not in the Stalin sense, not in the Mao sense, but in the sense of people who care about other people. They want a better world and they want to be decent, and that seemed like a good idea. And so that's probably what, as young people, has attracted us to this idea. We didn't, because to be right was to be grey and to be tedious and selfish and to promote kind of old-fashioned reactionary ideas and so on. But I was very much struck by this idea when, after the 1989 Velvet Revolution, when Václav Havel was asked in an interview in The Spectator about the paradox that here he was a Bohemian, and he was from Bohemia, but he was an actual Bohemian. He was a playwright. He was a dissident of the pure, like the Velvet Revolution came from, the word came from the Velvet Underground. I mean, because they were a huge influence on Havel. And all of this, like, it was rock and roll. It was all these things. And so the two things seemed to be, there was a contradiction, because as the interviewer said to him, like, you're actually after overturning a socialist regime, a left-wing regime. So what does that make you? And he just said, my heart is on the left. And I thought that was beautiful encapsulation of my life and your life probably as well, that your outlook on life. And in a certain sense, we are on this side of the line, in a certain sense. There's no, we're good with it, but we're sort of exiles from that other side because we couldn't take any more the illogic, the unreason that was pertaining to so much of what was going on there. Isn't that right?
Well, again, I don't know if any of you have read anything from Václav Havel. He's an amazing playwright, and he became the leader of his nation at a time when people believed in the alchemical power of, again, compassionate artistry, before the word compassion was bastardized. But I'm not all right with it. I hate feeling othered. I hate the fact that language has been so destroyed that your sense of self and your family's sense of self and your ability to make a living and your ability to walk into a space without people staring at you in that accusatory, self-righteous manner. I would like to pretend that I don't give a fuck, but I do. It hurts every time because it's not true. And the idea of the truth, again, we talk about a post-truth era, but the idea that truth is no longer relevant. The idea that artists no longer aspire to that rock and roll thing you're talking about. One of the things that made artists amazing, one of the multiple things that made artists amazing, there's a good friend of mine here, we've been friends since we were kids. He's a whistleblower who changed the reality for vulnerable people in state-ordained, state-paid-for institutions. And yet as a whistleblower, he's regarded as a scumbag. We had this idea that artists were the people who had the courage to walk into a room and regardless of the lies being told, they found that whispered voice to speak the truth. Now, unfortunately, too many artists not just speak the lie, but scream it and demand the silence of anybody who doesn't agree.
I think in a way we were kind of spoilt when we were younger by virtue of the idea that we were surrounded by all these heroic figures, Solzhenitsyn, Havel, all these guys. We were seeing them all the time. But we kind of forgot the length of time they spent in the gulags and in the jails of Prague and so on. There was a price to be paid for their heroism or for their status in the end. And, now we are out. We're out there, but I'm not making any predictions, Terry. So don't get carried away. We might all die as far right fascists. So don't get your hopes up. Anyway. Terry came up with this idea when we discussed this evening the very first time. He suggested that we should open it to the floor for the second half. So I think there's a roving mic somewhere. Yes, Stephen has it there. So anybody want to join in? Don't make too long of speeches now. Just questions or statements. Not.
Anybody?
Terry's the speech.
Any questions for Terry?
Nobody else.
Good man.
Hi, I'd just like to say that I know Terry and I've met you before, John, but
I've never met you in my life.
But I certainly think that two of you are two of the finest writers we have in Ireland today, so I do really enjoy reading.
Thank you.
And going back to the artist thing, there'd be at least 16 of the signatories that shut down the Mayflower event where we were originally supposed to have Mise Éire, are really good, close, personal friends of mine who I'd meet regularly, And I find it really hard when you're talking about truth, and kind of facing the truth. I know personally 3 Irish girls who both had double mastectomies. One of them when she was within a month of her 16th birthday. And all my other friends know at least 2 of them as well. And I just find it so hard that people can ignore these truths. And I don't know when that's going to change. I hope it does. And I'd be interested to know when and if you think it will change. That pervading ability to ignore reality and to sign a petition to shut something down, like of Irish culture, you know, by the people who proclaim to peddle it.
It's a very good question. It's a very sobering question. You know, I wouldn't be making any predictions for the short or medium term on that one, because the rot is too deep. The structural damage to our culture or to our institutions is too deep, too much. You know, we have to basically go back to the foundations and dig them up and throw them away and start again from about 6 foot down. Because, you know, in the first place, the conversation of our people has been corrupted completely. So without that, you know, if you had a country that was like this room, yes, but you don't. This is the only room I can almost promise in Ireland that has got maybe 300-400 people talking and thinking about these things. The only room in the country. That's the sad truth. It's a start, yes, but we need to work on the contagion element, you know, and to get that message out. But that is the way, I believe, one by one. And on that point, before I asked Terry to come in, like on that point, I always say to people, you know, people say, well, what can I do? You know, you can do in your life, in each encounter, every day, to simply say to that other person, whoever they might be, what you know to be true. A friend of mine has a great saying, if they don't know, you have to tell them. That's the way that's the power of the powerless that Havel talked about. If people are asking you, if they ask you a question, don't fudge it, don't dodge it, don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them the truth. And that's the way we'll win this.
How the fuck do I follow that? When we look at children, and when we look at children who, again, and I'm using the term advisedly, but who believe they're born in the wrong body, that's a process of indoctrination. And that process of indoctrination has been happening for quite some time. And those children and their parents, I think, have to be treated with actual compassion. Again, I keep on using that word because the word has been so bastardized. Because it must be an unimaginable horror, a waking nightmare, to realize that you facilitated the butchery of your child for an ideology. And you have to double down and triple down. And those people, those parents and those children, we collectively need to protect them. At the same time, why the fuck is this shit in schools? Why are teachers, why are adult teachers adamant that they're allowed to have secret conversations with impressionable children about adult sexuality? Now, that's not rhetoric, by the way. I'm not suggesting they're pedophiles. I'm asking, why does any teacher, I've been a teacher for decades. I was a teacher in all the major universities in the country before I got cancelled. But why, if I, as a teacher, want to sit down with a student, an adult student, over 18, and discuss sexuality, I'm rightly perceived as a problem. But if I'm an adult sitting down with a child who's 6 years of age and confused, and we're having a private conversation that their parents don't need to know about, I'm a fucking hero. So it starts with the education system. We have a litany of ministers for education who are some of the most corrupted individuals in the history of our state. How have we allowed this to happen? How have we entrusted these fucking degenerates with our children?
I think there are many reasons, just to address that question, there are many reasons or many explanations for why this is happening. But one of them undoubtedly relates to the last event that we with John Wedger and Suzanne. These criminals know what they've done. They know what they're responsible for. and they're trying to rig the game so that by the time it gets out, paedophilia will no longer be a crime.
Okay, I again, with respect, I'm going to question that, and simply the reason I'm going to question it is that it may be true, but the blanket assertion that is driven by pedophilia is part of the problem, because that allows people who go, I'm not a pedophile, to be excluded from it. I don't give a fuck whether you're a pedophile or not. You're a degenerate because you're teaching children the most corrosive ideologies imaginable because it makes you feel good. Get the fuck out of the classroom.
Can I ask you, what's your opinion on the family law courts and the in-camera rule? Like, would you agree with me that that's where a lot of child abuse and child kidnapping starts?
Well, I've been talking and writing about the family law courts for a very long time, nearly 30 years. And yes, I think they're absolutely rancid. I mean, one of the things that has struck me in the last few years is that what I was seeing in those courts, not just in my own life, but also as a journalist, talking to many people who had suffered at the hands of brutalizing judges, that this was almost a rehearsal for what we've been going through the last few years. That it was like an experiment in how far they could go in a supposedly democratic free society in actually using state coercion and force against people and not get a response. And actually what they discovered was they got very little response, apart from that guy in the Irish Times who was always banging on about fathers. And that they said, okay, that was good, that worked. And the next thing, they were in your house, in effect telling you how many people could be sitting on your sofa on a Friday evening. Where did that come from? It struck me time and again. It's like at the opening of Franz Kafka's novel, The Trial, where the two officers come to arrest him. And one of the striking things about that, it's the most amazing first sentence in all of literature, I believe, because it has the entire book in it. The sentence is, somebody must have been telling lies about Joseph K. because without having done anything wrong, he was arrested one fine morning. But the most sensational thing about that is that the officers, what they do, one of them sits down at his table and eats his breakfast. And the other one tells him, that night dress, you better be getting a different one because that won't last long in the jail, you know. Now, this is what's happened fundamentally in the last 6 years, if you want to go right down, is that the state has claimed the right to interfere in your most intimate life, to come into your house and tell you who should be there and who shouldn't, to tell you when you can leave your house. Because remember, they didn't just tell us that you have to, we misremember this. I think a lot of people misremember this and think, oh no, they said you could leave your house but you could only go 5 or 2 kilometers. No. They told you you can only leave your house if you have a good excuse. And then you can only go 5 kilometers or 2 kilometers. But they were telling us you can't leave your house until you have a good excuse. And you had to give that to a guard. And he decided whether that was a good excuse or not. And if it wasn't, he sent you home again. This is how did this happen? How did we allow this to happen? And promise me, please, will everybody tell me it'll never happen again? Good. Say it again. It'll never happen again. It'll never happen again.
Never happen again, John. Never.
Unfortunately, it's happening right now.
Yes, it is. It is.
And it's happening with these movements. Again, the so-called trans movement. And again, to make it very clear, somebody who identifies as trans, they're human beings who should be treated with the respect that all human beings should be treated with, but the trans agenda doesn't give a fuck about those people. All it cares about is the corruption of the idea of family. Like John is talking about intimacy. If you read 1984, what's remarkable about it, and again, he's talking about Kafka, and both of them are detailing the incredible humanity of intimacy. Read 1984 again. It's an incredible book, but read it and this time recognize that it's a book about intimacy, about the regulation of intimacy and the dehumanization of intimacy. And what we have done, again with COVID, again, John says, how did we let that happen? And it's so incredulous, it's so absurd that we partook in this fucking charade of horseshit that now, retrospectively, some people can't see it, so they have to double down because they're ashamed of who they became. Like when you sell your soul, it hurts, but when you fucking hand your soul over of your own volition and then start screaming about the neighbor next door who's taking a 5-minute walk, you have destroyed the fabric of what it means to be human. Now we've taken that further. Anybody who questions the trans agenda is suddenly transphobic. I don't know what transphobic means because I don't know what trans means. But you... Listen, love, we actually will, because that's why I said to you earlier, and when the microphone gets to you, we happily will. Maybe I'm fucking addressing it now. Okay, so when we talk about the idea of transphobia, what does it mean? We're talking about a phobia that is applied to something that not only is nefarious on every level and destructive on every level to society, to children, and to families. We are talking about it as an act of heroism. There is no heroism in destroying humanity.
This is one of the astonishing things about all this stuff and all of these, the woke stuff and the COVID stuff and all this, that it has created all of these bizarre undertows whereby people work against one another by virtue of their fear and paranoia and all these things. You know, so you get this bizarre, like you get a phenomenon like what Patrick E. Walsh is talking about, this excess death, where you have, you know, the very people who have suffered the most, other than the ones who have died, the people who are left behind by the people who have died, are the first to jump to the defense of the government if somebody suggests that their relation or their husband or wife was killed by the government. They'll be down the throat of the accuser instead of actually, and that's not an accident. This is all engineered. It's all part of the thing. So, you know, the trans thing the same. I mean, people, you can watch people and see their response. You know, they immediately, most people come out with the RTE response. And when you then say, well, yeah, but what about this? They then say, oh, well, maybe that, yeah. I remember being in a shop one day with a person, you know, and this shopkeeper was talking about, throwing out this thing about Enoch Burke. Oh, he's a bit of a nutcase and all this. And I said, well, you know, supposing, you know, you've got a nice black and white painting there, and supposing somebody comes in and says, no, that's not black and white, that's not black, that's not white, that's blue and green. Okay, from now on you say that that's blue and green, not black and white. Okay, is that all right? Anything else? Any questions? Like, would you be happy with that? Pardon?
Sorry, excuse me. There's just a few people here that, sorry lads, we've only about 15 minutes left and there's 2 people that want to ask a question here first, so
okay.
we'll
come back. We
might just try and get through these 2 first if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Nikki.
You'll be third.
Nikki.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm from Radio Kilkenny City, so proud to be here. Thank you so much. What I thought was so funny was you had a spy among you today at some point, but it's actually quite funny. This was sent to me, and this was their comment. I'm pretty sure this is the new Listún Varna. Are You Dancing has been replaced by, what are your thoughts on Justin Barrett? He's the new barometer. Snog, marry, avoid. Your options are Justin Barrett, Maria Steen, and Justin Boyd Barrett. I thought so that was quite silly. So instead of them having some political argument, they're actually starting to agree with us on various things, so they're just making silly comments now, you know what I mean? So actually a lot of people that we're talking to at the radio station, they're agreeing on health, they're agreeing on migration, and they're agreeing on education, so I just thought that was a really good thing. And my grandma always said, praise from fools was no praise at all, and the same was true of insults, so when they call us far right, I see it as a badge of honour. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, when both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach in the same week say the same thing as the the far right have been saying for years, you kind of have to wonder where the line is anymore. Because, but remember the rule. I invented 4 rules some years ago to ground myself whenever I was wavering in my thinking or not sure what to make of anything. And the 4 rules are: number 1, every word out of their mouth is a lie. That still obtains. Number 2, they're not in charge. Number 3, it's not about your health. Number 4, they're trying to kill you. So even though the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have both said that told us that 80% of people in IPAS centres are not asylum seekers, they're actually refugees. We knew that already, but that doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean, well, now we're going to act on the logic of that. It means we're saying that to shut you up. And when you've been silent for 3 or 4 weeks thinking something's going to happen, we're going to go back to the way we were doing things before. That's what that means.
Just one more.
John, just for a second, John's 4 rules sound like a standard domestic relationship. But Nicky, it's great to see you, by the way. But just again, that lady who asked about Enoch Burke, I'm going to phrase this, forgive me if I was a bit hasty with you earlier. Enoch Burke is hard to like, but Enoch Burke might be one of the bravest human beings this country has ever created.
I agree. I don't know about the like part either, but I mean, I don't think he doesn't even want us to like him. He doesn't care, which is great. That's the first thing you got to do is abandon the desire to be liked. I think I've said before the Burkes are the moral immune system of Ireland. That's the benchmark that we have to look to if we're going to understand what is necessary in order to defeat this. Ultimately, you have to be prepared to go to jail for 500 plus days if that's what is on the cards. And you've got to, and instead of coming out and begging for mercy or forgiveness, come out and tell the world that the judge is bent.
But again, just for a second. Yes, I agree. But just for a second, beyond Enoch Burke as an individual and beyond the Burke family as a family, Enoch Burke did spend over 500 days in jail, which is beyond comprehension that happened on our watch. But while, again, and I hate reductionist labels, but I'll talk about it in terms of the left in a reductionist sense. When the courts, under the order of the government, emptied his bank account, those dumb fucks cheered in celebration, having no idea that a precedent had just been set for all of our accounts.
That's right. And one other point about this that I think is very important to remember. We talked about Orwell. We talked about 1984. There's one of the central motifs of that book is coming to the denouement, where what's the guy? The other guy. Winston's the tormentor. What's his name again? Simon Harris. Okay. so Simon Harris says to Winston that 2 and 2 is 5. And he keeps at him until he gets him to actually say, not just to say it, but to believe it. That's what they wanted Enoch Burke to do. That's why Enoch Burke was in jail. It had nothing to do, contempt of court. Well, when judges are contemptible, there's only one response that is merited, and that's contempt. And that's what happened here, because they twisted the meaning of the case in order to try to discredit Enoch Burke. They tried to make out that the principal had never instructed Enoch Burke to call a child they. She had in an email. And the judge who said that knew that it had happened. and yet they continue to lie and lie and lie and lie. And with the result that 90% of the people of Ireland, if you actually say to them, they say, oh, well, it's the contempt of court, it's nothing to do with trans. It is to do with trans. He refused to say something he knew to be nonsense.
John, sorry to interrupt, lads. We have to finish up at 8:15 because Eddie Hobbs is going to be joining us at 8:30. There's 3 questions here. We might take them all together and maybe just keep your response brief if you could, lads, as well. And the questions as well, if you could, please.
Hi, John. Sorry. I just want to do a call out for Ross Lahive. Ross Lahive, in case nobody knows who this fella is, he could be spending 2 years in jail on Tuesday. He went to the libraries. I was with him in the libraries. We used to do the libraries and stuff. And I'm known as a library terrorist. But anyway, the thing is, Ross Lahive, right, it could be spending up to 2 years in jail on Tuesday because he went into the library where there was a transgender story hour going on with children. And I just want to say to anybody who is here, in Tralee in the morning at 10:30 in Tralee, if anybody can be available to attend the courthouse there's a fella, that's on Tuesday the 4th of November, Ross Lahive could be put down for 2 years. I just want to give a bit of a call out to the guy because he deserves it. I worked with the guy and I know what he's like.
Okay, well done. Thank you.
Thanks. Terry, John, I've been involved with 6 years now of writing annals of what's going on in the country on paper, on ink. I usually just note what's going on, and I try to be neutral, I try to be as clipped as I can. It doesn't get too much mileage generally, and I don't ever intrude into the world, but I did recently myself, and the calligrapher went to the place where the WHO had declared there would be, within a simulation, another pandemic in northern South America. And we did, I suppose, something very absurd in that we decided to take the WHO at their face value and that their other 2 simulations had begat pandemic. Well, the COVID was the event 201, and then they did a monkeypox where they said in May 21, they said there'd be a May 22 monkeypox. So there was a kind of a track record of simulations becoming real. So we took the initiative to go to the exact place that they pinpointed in basically Venezuela, Guyana border on a mountain, and we decided to do an event, a happening, an intrusion into their reality to try to get beyond maybe the satirical nature of the thing we'd been doing, but to actually battle them on their own absurdity, if that makes any sense. And the pandemic was meant to happen on the 9th of September this year. It was meant to be declared. Meant means within the simulation. Now, it's not. I don't mean meant. But anyway, thankfully, it didn't happen. But it was just, it got more traction in normie world than our other little satiricisms in a funny kind of way. I won't go into all that now, but just any comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And that lady over there, would you like to use your voice there and shut up? And just bear in mind that we... sorry, go on.
Sorry, I just want to ask you a question about propaganda, because you used the term wordspell, I think, and propaganda. And we know that the media is captured, we know that newspapers are captured, we know that schools are captured. Everything, education, everything, newspapers, radio, TV, everything's captured. And it's constant propaganda. And those labels, far right, that's propaganda label. How do we crack? How can we, I know you talk over the fence, you talk to the lady to check on you. How can we crack this? How can we, because this is relentless what they're sending our way. It's social media, it's the television in the corner, it's the propaganda. The TV in the corner is the propaganda machine. It's relentless.
Don't watch it.
TV.
Now,
what's the answer?
I'm watching it. How do we get the normal people out there, the wonderful people out there in our country, the masses who are under its spell?
Terry and John, if you can just answer all those questions in under 2 minutes, that'd be great. Thanks very much. Thank you.
I was, yes, Ross Lahive, certainly, yes, and thank you for that. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give you a very simple solution to your problem. Just buy them my book for Christmas.
And I'm writing a book tonight. Get them to my mind as well. I think it's a wonderful question, but the idea of, like John said earlier, that he thinks this is one of the few rooms, or maybe the only room in the country where this conversation is happening. I disagree with that. I think this conversation is happening silently in multiple rooms around the whole fucking country. But people are afraid to speak out.
900 people, or whatever.
Perhaps. You haven't been at a party in my gaff. But the idea of propaganda, the function of propaganda is to create an inevitable outcome. The function of art is to create an outcome that is hitherto never conceived of. Start being an artist and stop being a fucking propagandist. That's all I'll say.
Okay, guys, that wraps up another segment. I just want to give an immense thanks to Terry, the gentleman, and John, the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend. John, you've done absolute Trojan work there for the last couple of hours. Absolutely spectacular. Truth bombs. Wall to wall, endless truth bombs.